Welcome to Utopia Live. Utopia is a global SAP partner providing data-driven business solutions to asset-intensive as well as retail and fashion industries. Focused on data quality, migrations, and governance solutions that enable organizations to harness high-quality data to take cost out of their business, maximize operational performance, automate and streamline, and better leverage technology investments. Thanks for joining today. This interactive event is designed to allow you to fuel your initiatives. You're encouraged to be engaged and ask questions from today's subject matter experts. And now, it's time for Utopia Live. Welcome to Utopia Live. I'm your host, Tom Martin, and today we're here to talk about an incredibly exciting topic, and that's how high-quality data is propelling asset excellence at Cleco. And one of the folks at Cleco, the VP of Asset Management, Mark Prevost, is here to tell us all about it. He is the asset management guy at Cleco, actually one of the brighter asset management leaders I've ever had the privilege of meeting. So we're all in for a very, very special treat here today. We're also joined by Braden Slezak, who's Vice President at Utopia, alongside Gorpam Khan, Vice President at Utopia as well. But before we get over to those gentlemen, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Utopia Live is all about you, helping to overcome your greatest challenges, propel your initiatives, really help move your organizations forward. So to that end, it's all about answering your questions. So if you go to the control panel on your screen right now, you're going to see a questions drop down. Go ahead and click that, type in your questions. I'm sure you've already read the description of what we're going to talk about today. You might already have some questions in mind. If you do, go ahead and type them in right now. Type them in as we engage in our conversation, or type them in at the end. But no matter what you do, go ahead and submit those questions. It's all about you. The other quick piece of housekeeping is there's also a chat drop down as well. In that chat drop down, you're going to see a very, very important link, and that is to schedule a follow-up meeting with Utopia subject matter expert teams following today's broadcast. Of course, if you have questions you really might not feel comfortable asking, or you know they're going to require a lot of in-depth explanation, kind of a little bit more complex, go ahead, hit that link. It's an interactive scheduling tool. Pick the time most convenient for you. Our team looks forward to speaking with you. So with that, I want to make sure that we save all the time that we possibly can to engage in this great conversation here today, answer as many questions as we can. So I'm going to turn to our panelists today. Again, Mark, Braden, Gorpam, good morning. Welcome to Utopia Live, guys. Great to have you here today.
Morning, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
And Mark, I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. So being a Syracuse Orangeman alum, I see that you've got the LSU hat on, and you guys just own the show. The Tigers are the team to beat. How are you guys going to do this year?
Well, I guess the pandemic will determine that, but I think we'll have a good year again. I think we've lost a lot of members to the NFL in the draft, but I think LSU will be in the top 5 competing for the national championship again.
Well, that's what they say, right? So if you're losing players to go to the NFL, that's a good sign you got a great program. But let's go ahead and hop into the topic at hand today, and that's all about how high quality data is propelling a lot of initiatives, a lot of asset management initiatives and successes at Cleco. Of course, Cleco being a utility, it's incredibly important to have reliability baked into your assets. And one of the ways that Cleco is doing that is through harnessing the power of data. So, Mark, I guess I want to go ahead and turn it over to you. I know we're going to have some folks on the line that are maybe overseas, they're kind of dialing in globally. Might not have heard of who Cleco is. So can you share a little bit more about Cleco and what you guys are up to down there?
Yeah, sure. Cleco is a utility, vertically integrated utility in Louisiana. We serve the area from just south of Shreveport, Louisiana, all the way down to the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain. We have a regulated and an unregulated arm. Our unregulated arm is called Cleco Cajun, and it serves approximately 17 co-ops and municipalities scattered across the state. So our footprint, when you consider both the regulated and the unregulated arm, is pretty large. As I said, we're vertically integrated, so we have generation, transmission, and distribution assets. And 2 years ago, we embarked on a journey to implement SAP, an enterprise approach, across the entire utility, from customer to finance to enterprise asset management. So getting good quality data was very important to getting this system off the ground and it being successful.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And I guess, kind of a couple of follow-up questions that arise out of that is, again, for our folks that are kind of coming in from overseas, might not be familiar with the difference between regulated, unregulated. Can you just share a little bit more detail about what that means, what that dynamic looks like?
Well, regulated, we're subject to the Louisiana, in this case, Louisiana Public Service Commission. So in the United States, virtually every state, every utility that serves customers is subject to regulations. My regulations, we just can't charge whatever we want. That's subject to the oversight, in our case, of the LPSC. So all of the expenditures, whether they be capital or O&M, need to be justified in order to get those incorporated into the rates. So very important that we have good data, that we can use that data to back up these expenditures and show that these expenditures were warranted.
Yeah, that's exactly where my mind went there, Mark, is that, when we're talking about regulated industries, regulated utilities, you can only charge so much by a matter of law, right? So in order to have an acceptable price point, you've got to have some reliability in your assets. You've got to be able to provide operational continuity to your customers. It's just kind of baked into the overall utility framework. So it's very interesting to hear you say that. That's going to segue into a lot of the conversation that we're about to jump into, and that's really entirely your world, Mark, and the role of asset management. And what I really would love to dig into is, for you, the role of data in asset management. Where does it play a home? Where does it have a home? And how do you leverage data to propel your asset excellence?
Right. Well, now that we're a little over a year and a half into this journey of implementing SAP, we're starting to look at KPIs, key performance indicators. That's one of the first steps, is deciding, how do I use this system, this SAP system now, to better run the business? How do I make better decisions on O&M spend, on capital spend? Why do I have reliability issues that I need to either put a maintenance plan in place, change the frequency of that maintenance plan, or maybe not do it because I've got a piece of equipment that's reliable that maybe I can back off on this an expensive maintenance plan to implement. So without having good data, both master data, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, and transactional data, that I can use that data to generate these KPIs and decide what levers do I need to pull to operate the business more effectively.
Right. And Mark, maybe tell us a little bit more around, obviously, again, utilities, we're thinking about reliability to the customer, keeping those operations, keeping those transmission as well as generation assets up and running. It's critically important, no?
Yes, like using these KPIs. I mean, we factor in a number of things. One of the things we factor in is a KPI we call asset health. What is the health of that asset? That's just something we're starting to embark on. So doing things like gauging the life, where is an asset in its life, in its overall life cycle? Let's say a transformer, for instance. So there's different things we can look at, like the dissolved gas analysis, doing some of the Doble testing, how many through faults maybe has it seen, that transformer? What's the maintenance history look like? How many work orders have been written? What type of work orders were they? Were they preventative maintenance work orders, or were they reactive maintenance work orders? So all of those factor into the health of that asset. And then we use that health index to help us make decisions on what should we target replacement of that asset, or do we need to do additional testing, to further determine, what is the overall condition of that asset? So Having those things, which is, some part SAP, some part field testing, to get an overall general health of that asset are very important in gauging its life cycle. And when is the opportune time for me to replace that asset? And that goes, not only for transmission assets like transformers, but generation assets as well, heat exchangers and pumps and steam turbines and gas turbines, on and on.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And so for the folks that, might not be involved, directly in asset management, they might be more on the IT or technical side that are dialed in. I mean, just quite frankly, I mean, this is where high quality data actually comes down to brass tacks. It's dollars and cents business value. If you don't have good data, you can't keep the assets up and running. Profitability suffers, reliability to the customer suffer in a utility or a regulated utility context. Data is a driving force for you guys, as it is for most companies out there.
Yeah, correct. And I think, today that management, wants to know, okay, I want to see proof. Why do I need to replace this asset? I want to see it in terms of, of data. Use data to tell me, why do I need to spend X number of $1 million to replace this asset, and then how do I go about ranking? I have a limited amount of capital I can spend, so how do I go around about ranking projects? So having that good data is necessary in order that I spend the capital in the places I need to spend, or the O&M, or it gets to the end of the year and it's crunch time from a budget standpoint, from an earnings standpoint. Where do I need to make cuts? So having that data, allows us to make not just cuts based on gut, which, years ago you had a lot of experience. Today, the workforce is aging, a lot of retirements. You don't have that experience embedded within the organization, that they have intimate knowledge of assets. That's still important, don't get me wrong, but having the data now to back that up is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a conversation that we're having a lot, Mark, with a lot of our the customers around the globe. Is we're in this, what I've started calling the skilled labor workforce crisis, right? It's a bubble, right? Those folks that are within our organizations that have those skills that they've acquired through years, often decades, they're heading to the door, and the next generation's on its way in. But they don't have that institutionalized knowledge yet. And one of the ways you can help combat that is with really, really, really solid asset data. So it's interesting to hear you bring that up. But that's certainly the whole knowledge transfer, knowledge retention, critical component a lot of companies are looking at these days, is that workforce continues to kind of age out the door, and hopefully head down to your parts and get out on a lake or the Gulf somewhere and start enjoying their retirement. But we wish the best for the next generations coming up, no doubt about it. And Mark, one of the things that you touched on as you were kind of responding there was developing maintenance strategies. And I know that you guys have taken a hard look at this. You've got a program going on, maintenance strategies individually designed for assets. Can you share a little bit more about that process and that initiative you guys have?
Yeah, during this SAP integration through Utopia, we engaged another party called MaxGrip that helped us come up with some predictive maintenance strategies based upon asset type, whether it was a pump or a fan, a steam turbine, a breaker, a control system, up and down the different object types, the different types of equipment we had throughout generation and transmission, to come up with predictive maintenance strategies. What testing should I be doing on this piece of equipment? Whether that's vibration analysis, oil analysis, performance testing, infrared, any of those technologies to help us assess the condition of that equipment from a predictive maintenance standpoint. So we're, trying to migrate from preventative condition to a more condition-based maintenance strategy. I mean, that's the point. That's the objective here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the next frontier, right? Is how do you translate, high quality data, what you know about your assets, however you're collecting it, whether it's vibration, it's thermography, it's infrared, whatever it is, taking that incredible data and building that picture, that almost that digital twin of that asset, where you understand the individualized components of that asset, you understand how to translate that into effective strategies that allow you to prevent that critical failure before it occurs. It's something that a lot of organizations could only hope to be doing right now. So it's a big congratulations, pat on the back that you're leading that charge down there at Cleco, Mark. Certainly the next frontier in asset management. With that, I want to go ahead and turn to Braden. Braden, I want to get you involved in the conversation here, man. Talk a little bit more. We've heard Mark share just briefly, and we'll turn back to him on it, but how Cleco is embarked on an SAP S4 transformation at the organization, kind of that big, incredible technology investment that allows organizations really to have a fully integrated, transparent view of their organization from A to Z, allows organizations to really do some amazing things and make some incredibly nimble, dynamic decisions. But in order to be able to get there, in order to be able to do that, you've got to get to S4. In order to do that, you've got to get your data into S4. So, Braden, can you tell us a little bit more about data preparedness in S4? I know it's a topic you're passionate about. You talk with a lot of folks about it, a subject matter expert in the space. Can you share a little bit more with us?
Sure. And Tom, you've used the analogy, and so I'll share it with this group here. When someone is making an investment, making a move to S4, they're looking at making that move and getting all those advantages that you talked about. But if the data is not right, if the data is not solid, all you're going to do is get all your information, the wrong information, faster, and that's not really going to help the business. So it's one of the things that Utopia and SAP and SAP's users group supports, is getting your data ready in advance of the S4 migration. In most cases, MDG, SAP's master data governance, is used to help accomplish that. And lack of data preparedness is often the cause of project delays when going to S4. So getting ahead of it is an important part of that S4 readiness. And we work with clients to kind of understand the ways to accomplish that. And that's certainly something that has been very important to Cleco's journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to incorporate Gorpam Khan, VP of Delivery from Utopia. Really, when I think of Gorpam, I think of the guy that's been there, done that, has the T-shirt for it. He's seen it all, working with customers around the globe. Gorpam, turning to you, what are some of the components that you look at and that you and your teams are very much focused on when we're talking about SAP S4 data preparedness?
Right. So it's basically at Cleco, we had a lot of data challenges. You know, when we started at Cleco, we basically were looking at data sitting in the legacy system that was not ready to be transformed into S4. But then we looked back at where exactly we need to start off with. So we looked at the assets in the field data collection, and we went and tagged the assets, you know, we barcoded the assets, you know, we validated the information on the field, looking into their PNIDs and, you know, restructuring the functional locations and building the hierarchy for the functional locations and building up the equipment underneath the functional locations. And all that stuff was like, it's something that really helped Cleco kind of advance in building the right data to be transformed into S4. So the challenges were typically starting right from the field. It wasn't there in the system. The data in the system wasn't appropriate and was wrongly defined. And we look at the standards, we build the standards, we cleanse the data, we transform the data. And that journey itself was like, you know, a 2-year-long journey where we were able to accomplish, you know, good data that was of great quality and of great use for making valid decisions for Cleco.
Yeah, absolutely, Gorpam, man. And one of the things you mentioned, you know, our folks on the line, they're interested in hearing about best practices. They're interested in hearing about lessons learned. Tell us a little bit more around master data collection, how you approached it. and what are some of the best practices there?
Right. So the master data collection would basically kind of result into multiple folds. Where you start off with is, when you look at typical utility or oil and gas industry, we should really look at their drawings, the existing drawings, the PNIDs, the data sheets, the manuals. Make sure that the data that is reflected in the system matches up with their documents. So if there is a discrepancy, the assets that are sitting on the field doesn't match up in for the characteristics or the descriptions of the equipment itself or the asset itself doesn't match up with your information in the system, then we have a problem. So we need to quickly address that. The best way to do is to walk down the field, to look at the assets physically, validate the information, looking at their the brass plates, and making the changes as necessary. And of course, there are certain limitations in SAP on how to build our descriptions, like short descriptions or long descriptions. In the legacy application, you might have the freedom to kind of input a lot of information as part of your descriptions, but in SAP, there are certain limitations. So we need to match up to the standards of SAP. So then we go do the cleansing and transformation part of the data structuring. So the typical way to basically look at the data, master data, is to basically validate it from a field data collection or field data validation standpoint. So if you really look at your data and be able to validate your asset and match that information that is sitting in your in your system, legacy application, that's what values or matters more when you basically way forward for S4 transformations.
Absolutely, and Gorpam, you on the line, you're our tech guy on the line right now. So I know that we've got other folks like Mark that are on the business side. We've got operational, reliability, maintenance, asset management leaders on the line with us that might not be as familiar with the technology side of what we're talking about. Can you share a little bit more, Gorpam, around what it sounds incredibly labor intensive, but maybe a little bit more around what sort of software or solutions are involved in projects like this?
So it's basically, we're dependent on using SAP data services, predominantly because we can build rules in data services platform, and we could reuse those rules, when we are ready for data migration transformations. Because, when we start analyzing the data, we look at the legacy data, we assess the legacy data, we come up with observations and recommendations on what can change, what can improve the quality of the data. So then we build rules to transform the data. So those rules are not necessarily the data migration rules. So those are the cleansing and transformation rules, like cleansing the data, the restructuring, transforming the data to the standards, so on and so forth. But those rules, once you build those rules, majority of those rules can be reused, as part of data migration exercise as well. Now, so most of the cases, it so happens that we build a lot of rules, but we don't have a facility or a tool to carry those rules forward for the next phase of the project, which is the data migration itself, right? So using data services tool and information steward, these are the things that can really help a lot in building the rules and reusing those rules. At the back end, when we transform the data, we use machine learning technique, where we basically use the machine learning tool to process large volumes of data in a very short span of time. So let's say we're looking at about 200, 300,000 or 500,000 material records, or about a couple of 100,000 equipment records. That's a lot of data for us to process. If we have to manually do it, or do any other conventional way. But Utopia's capability of using machine learning can really help accelerate the project timelines, be able to done a large volume, cleanse and transform large volumes of data, and be ready for the program expectations, and timelines.
Hey, Tom, I'll add a little bit to what Gorpam shared.
Yeah,
One of the things we're looking we're starting to do now and introducing is leveraging machine learning in combination with OCR or character recognition, taking photos of nameplates, being able to pull that information, digitize it, and then then using machine learning automation to then enrich the data. So that's one thing that's newer in our offerings. It's something that has some huge advantages, particularly when we talk a little bit about the field data collection, master data collection piece that can really help with that process.
Right, and I guess maybe turning back to Mark now on that. Mark, I know that you guys do that quite a bit. Either it's a walk down or a walk through, whatever we want to call it in our individual organizations. I mean, that takes time, right? I mean, to go through individually capture asset information just by walking along the generation facility, or even more so when we're talking about being a T&D organization or a transmission and distribution organization like Cleco is being vertically integrated. Being able to capture that asset information, I mean, that's pretty time intensive, no?
Yes, and I would, while Utopia was, great in the field and using the tool they had for data collection in the field, I think it's important that you have somebody with them. In our case, we use retirees from each of the facilities that we were in the process of collecting data. They know where the equipment is, they know the history of it, they know where they can find the documentation, the instruction manuals, drawings, what have you, so that can be used to enrich the data. So having those personnel in the field, in our case, we use retirees, I think is very important. So if you're planning an undertaking like this, make sure you have some of your people that can help to support Utopia in the field. That makes the process run so much easier, so much smoother, and is a huge time saver. So just a word of advice to people that are anticipating maybe undertaking a project like this.
That's great advice, Mark. And that's what the folks that are here today are here to listen about. They want to hear the lessons learned. They want to hear the best practices. So that's a really powerful piece of advice, because you're going to run into situations where it's like, okay, we've got the asset, but where's this, or where could I find that, or this should be here. It's kind of missing. What's going on with that? Having that institutionalized knowledge, very, very important. Very impressed by the way that Cleco kind of leverages the knowledge in the organization. To hear that you have retirees involved in projects like that, I mean, it makes just total, simple, complete sense. It's just an absolutely brilliant thing to do. That's awesome. Hats off to you guys down there for that. Mark, I want to turn the conversation to another direction, and that is, it makes sense. You guys are down there in Louisiana. We're calling it now Cleco Cajun. Can you tell us a little bit more about Cleco Cajun, what that organization looked like before they became part of the Cleco family, what they do, what Cleco Cajun's all about?
Cleco Cajun, as I said earlier, is our unregulated arm. Some assets we acquired from NRG here about a little over a year ago. And it consists of 4 sites here in Louisiana that we recently, they were already on SAP, but we underwent a transition of migrating that data from the NRG SAP system into the Cleco system. So we just completed that in June. And in the areas of generation, transmission, they had no distribution, and finance and stores. So we just went through that transition. It's a little bit easier than what we did. Our legacy system was not SAP, so we had to build the data from scratch. But in this case, because we wanted it to mirror our system, so that we had everything on the same platform, from a configuration standpoint, we changed things like the accounting structure, the hierarchy of the functional location structure. The stores, the way stores, the materials were managed. So even though it was an SAP system, it wasn't S4HANA. They were in the process of migrating their system over to S4HANA. We did make a lot of changes in the system.
Sure. Yeah, and Mark, maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit. I mean, could you imagine, your VP of asset management down there, you've got a team, they're focused on all things keeping assets up, operational, minimizing downtime, maintaining that operational continuity. Could you imagine being able to do that as effectively if you're working with the disparate systems that aren't speaking to each other? You've got assets on this side that you're looking at in one system, have a different way of looking at them as compared to perhaps the systems used on the side of an acquisition or in the event of a merger, some sort of event like that. Could you imagine being in a world not bringing those two together and being halfway as effective?
Yeah, no, our legacy systems, while there was some communication between them, it was very difficult. And then anytime you made a change and you upgraded, like Impact, for instance, had an interface to PeopleSoft for the financial side. Well, anytime you did an upgrade on that side, you had to worry about that interface. So with having everything on the same platform, the configuration the same, it makes it a lot easier. Before getting reports out, if you wanted to get a report on, what's my book value on this asset, so I can make a determination, is it time to replace it? What's the O&M spend on it versus the book value? Wasn't easy to do. Now it's so much simpler because now with everything being on the same platform, the same configuration, and the systems are communicate very efficiently between them, in the different lines of business, it makes it so much easier to do.
Braden, we haven't heard much from you, so I want to turn it to you. I know it's a topic that you're incredibly passionate about. It's all things data cleansing. And where I want to go with it is how do you approach when you're working with customers, prospective customers? How do you go about consulting them on the best ways to approach a data cleansing project and how they can best determine where their money is best spent?
Sure. Yeah, and there's a lot of different scenarios when we connect with clients around data cleansing requirements. In some scenarios, the client is pretty clear on where the trouble spots are and somewhat prescriptive on what they want done. In other cases, a client knows more anecdotally what is the issues, but really don't have the details. And so oftentimes we recommend on the front end to do what we call a data health assessment. Some folks would refer to it as profiling, but really identifies and pinpoints the issues that are occurring in the data, shows examples, percentages of where that issue may be occurring, shows specific examples of what that looks like, what that issue looks like, and then the possible impact that it's having on the business. That's often what we do on the front end, and then that drives our approach and recommendation around data cleansing, what to focus on, if there's multiple areas that are required, kind of how to prioritize that.
Absolutely, and Braden, what I love about our panel today, folks, is we've got Braden that's kind of on the front side. He's the strategist. He understands data cleansing, data enrichment inside and out. But we also have kind of the tip of the spear from an actual implementation delivery perspective, Gorpam Khan on the line with us as well. Gorpam, once you get in there, you and your teams get into an organization, you truly start kind of wrapping your heads around the organization, doing some of your internal assessments that I know you guys do when you get into the field, when you get into the data. Can you tell us a little bit more from your perspective, how you go about doing further consulting with folks in terms of where they need to place their focus when it comes to the data quality and data cleansing?
Sure. So, I mean, data migrations are, typically not understood right, when you come to implementations. So my experience working on many data migration projects, be it a utility, oil and gas, manufacturing, any sort of industry. So the important thing is, like, you need to understand your content, you need to understand your data. So what we do is we basically look at the data migration project more strategically, rather than just doing it, as a conventional approach, as one of those projects, one of those kind of projects to just implement, take data from source A to and move it to source B. That's not how we approach it. We look at it, from a more strategic standpoint. We look at the data itself, the existing data, and see how we can improve the content of the data, make it more usable, make it more, efficient in making right decisions, and help the business, gain some confidence on their business processes and overall business strategy itself. And so in the process of improvement, we look for any inconsistencies. That, like Braden said, data assessment it's a first-hand information or a first-hand report to kind of give the customer a quick overview on where they stand with their current data quality, and what are the areas that can help them improve, on the data quality. Be it eliminating the duplicates, be it trying to make the data compatible with the new applications or the new platform they try to move the data onto, and be it the standards, working on the standards to make sure that the data is globally acceptable. It actually satisfies the global needs on the data standards. Like, for example, materials. When we talk about materials, we talk about UNSPS codes. When we talk about equipments, we talk about ISO 14224 standards, so on and so forth. And we try to kind of build that relationship between the business and IT teams, more importantly, because you see there's a lot of disconnect. IT just basically thinks that this is just a placeholder. This is just an additional field that needs to be populated. But business looks at it differently. They say, no, there's a specific need for this information in this field, and it carries a lot of more importance from a business perspective. So we try to kind of build that relationship. And that's how we approach, from a strategic standpoint. And rest of it is just very standard. Like, we extract the data, we analyze the data, we transform the data, we cleanse the data and transform the data, we build the validations, and we make sure that there is a proper remediation, for the data that is being transformed from A to B, B to C, whatever. And then we create the load files and load the data into the target. That's from a technical standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's illuminating, Gorpam. Thank you for that. And Mark, kind of turning back to you on this. We've had a large conversation today around how high quality data can propel asset uptime, propel operational continuity, bring that reliability to the customer, improve maintenance productivity. But one area we haven't touched on yet is all things EH&S risks. And I know that your job, you're tasked with keeping things up and running, right? And that's the name of the game, in doing so as efficiently and as effectively as possible. But I know also as a leader within the organization, you share a joint responsibility of maintaining the reduction of EH&S risks. Can you help share a little bit more with folks around how your data and how data initiatives is helping kind of propel that EH&S risk reduction?
When you have accurate data on your equipment, any equipment that could pose risk. Let's say it's got some kind of hazardous material within it, like if there's frac well, EHC fluid is considered in some areas could be a carcinogen. So, knowing that there's a data sheet with a link to it, that this equipment contains EHC fluid, knowing that type of, hazard exists. Or, we have sulfuric acid. We have a number of different chemicals that pose hazards. So, we have links to that, those data sheets, that are kept on site, about hazardous materials, hazardous liquids, any hazardous material that we use in the process, in the generation or transmission area. There's links to it so that they can pull up those data sheets and see what precautions, what type of PPE. In addition to that, as part of EAM, we implemented WCM, work clearance management, lockout, tagout. So within that, it references the data objects. If I want to tag a piece of equipment, well, then it's going to generate that list of tags where the equipment records exist, for the equipment that I have to tag. Let's say I'm tagging out a pump. Well, in that particular pump, let's say there's a suction valve, a discharge valve, a breaker, what else may be in there. But those are equipment in some cases they're not. The valve is motor operated, it is an equipment. If it's manual, no. but still it's got that list of equipment that needs to be tagged and it's referenced on a PNID. So that's how we've leveraged the data within SAP to help improve environmental health and safety.
Yeah, very, very, very critical component. You know, we see in the news, right? Fortunately, it seems like it happens far too often, but we see those catastrophic, those big events. And I'm not going to name names, but there have been some. There's been some in the Gulf. There's been some all over the U.S. and the world, right? And when we see it, it's heartbreaking because oftentimes we're not just talking about loss of equipment, loss of structures. We're talking about loss of life. So there is a major focus on all things EH&S. I know that you guys do a great job of it down there, Mark, and again, hats off to you for your focus on that. It is so critically important. Mark, I want to keep it with you because I want to go back to something that Gorpum said. But before I do, just a bit of housekeeping here for our attendees. Please go ahead and hit the question tab there down in your control panel and start typing your questions in because we're going to turn to those audience questions here in just a moment. Type them in, get them in here now. I've already got a handful rolling in, and I want to make sure we can get through as many as possible. But Mark, real quickly, turning to you first, Gorpum kind of brought the idea to mind for me, and that's the idea to really have a team. When we talk about digital transformations, big projects, big technology projects, and how they affect the business, because that's what it's all about. I mean, it's not just technology for technology's sake. It's technology to drive business value and be those proactive enablers of the organization, of the business. And Mark, being on the business side, can you speak to how you and the IT or the technology arm of the organization have partnered together and maybe some of the best practices or lessons learned that you've learned along the way in terms of teaming up with them?
Yeah, we have within each area, with each line of business on the operations side, there's an IT partner. You know, because a lot of the things we may come up with a business idea, you know, of how to improve a process within SAP or how to leverage data, but it takes that partner within IT to see that gets done, you know, to do the technical side of, you know, making configuration changes or maybe even a customization for us to be able to utilize the technology to do what we need to do today. But one thing I want to stress is, you know, sustainability. You know, it's one thing that we spend all this time and effort to clean that data, but data is constantly changing. We're always changing out equipment. You know, we're always having to institute, for instance, a technical information letter on a piece of equipment that we receive from a manufacturer. It's having the organization in place to sustain the governance of that data and the systems and the business rules to do that. We're in the process of getting ready to implement MDG. So just because you said, hey, I've cleaned up my data on the front end, you've got to sustain that to keep it, because you spend all this time and effort if you go in to clean up data. And if you just let that go by the wayside, then you're back in the same boat again. If you can't believe the data, then you can't use the system to generate results and improve the business.
No, that makes great sense, Mark. I mean, and that's something that I hope our attendees really clued in on, really heard loud and clear. Really an integral component of your success down there. Mark, a question kind of rolling in here. Looks like a little bit more geared to you here, specific to you, so I'll let it rip. How did you manage the migration and integration of your new assets to your Cleco master data standards? What are some of the keys here? Looks like that's a lessons learned, best practices, that type of question.
Yeah, and I guess that's in reference to when we acquired the Cajun assets. Is you know, when we migrated them from the NRG SAP system into our system, you know, we had the data rules around, you know, what does a functional location look like? How do we name a functional location? What's the technical description for a piece of equipment? What's the object type look like? How do we name a maintenance plan? You know, a task list, a bill of material, you know, all of those rules. We used the data that NRG had, we cleansed it, then we used those business rules to name it. So then when we look at a Cleco power asset or a regulated asset, you know, from a description standpoint or a data classification standpoint, you know, those assets look the same. So if we want to go in and query the system to how much am I spending for vertical centrifugal pumps greater than 500 horsepower across all of our generation assets, we can do that because our data has that consistency in it. You know, how many work orders am I spending? What are the failures I'm seeing? The catalog code types. You know, all those are standard across these assets. So it makes, and when you have that, then you have enough data there for you to interrogate the data and be able to do some statistical analysis on it. If you didn't have that consistency across data, you wouldn't have a large enough data set to be able to do that, you know, and get something that I can take and implement to improve, again, the business, improve reliability, lower cost, you know, all of those things. And having that data consistency is very, very important. So, you know, we looked at the rules that we had and took the NRG data or the data from the Cajun assets and transformed them to look like our data set. And Utopia played, you know, the key role in that, leading role in transforming that data so it looked like our data. I'm not to say that we had the best data rules of all, but we needed that consistency.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Absolutely. Well, now I'll let you off the hook for a second. We'll turn it back to Braden. Braden, question about data quality methodology and what methodologies that you're prescribing as you're taking a look at the current operational asset management infrastructure and environment that you're seeing out there with customers. What sort of methodologies are you looking at from a data quality perspective?
Yeah, I actually probably gonna, because Corcoran was more intimate with that approach, I think I would probably lean on him on that. But typically what we're providing, and this is across many clients, there's a combination of things. You know, for example, we talked about the field data collection piece on the front end that's often necessary because there's a lot of unaccounted for assets in the plants. But generally, you know, from a methodology perspective around data quality, we look at, you know, the 4 key areas. We call them 4 C's. We look at classification, like assigning the right class to each object. Cleansing, so with every class and you know, those associated characteristics, we do parsing and standardizing. Creating, which is also referred to as an enrichment, which would be kind of finding that the missing pieces of information and helping populate that. And that's an example of like that badge scan where we can kind of help do an automated enrichment through that. And then consolidation, which is also referred to as deduplication, is once we've done some level of standardization, taking out the duplicates. I don't know, Corporal, if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I think, you know, just to add to what you just said, Braden, quality is an important aspect of data, especially master data, because, you know, that carries a lot of importance from many angles within any given business or industry. So we start off our journey, be it data analysis, assessment, cleansing, transformation, or migration, with more emphasis or major emphasis on data quality and standards. So we basically follow the industry's best practice approach, you know, when it comes to using the right tools, using the right technology, using the right standard, you know, it's all kind of predefined. So we basically kind of engage customers, you know, business teams to educate them on how this can be performed, you know, basically how the data can transform and what are the implications of not doing so, and how would they benefit if they basically stick to the standards and try to kind of improve the quality of the data. So this is a journey that basically kind of goes hand in hand with the business teams and the IT teams, and of course all the key players on the project. At the back end, like Braden said, you know, we focus on you know, the something called 4 C's. Just Braden explained that. So we take care of the duplicates, we take care of the inconsistencies, we take care of compliance issues, you know, missing standards, you know, improper descriptions, you know, improper specifications of the data within a given field. So when we basically look at customers, you know, migrating from a source or a target system, from a source system to S4 transformation project, then we basically look at their to kind of add value to their investment. You know, if we don't basically, you know, share that knowledge and information with the customers, there is no point in the customer investing so much of money and time and effort and resources in going from A to B, and the data isn't really serving the purpose. So this is very, very important. You know, data being your single source of truth matters a lot, because, you know, it basically ties in many angles in any given business.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Gorpam. Mark, coming back around to you here. You know, question that's kind of come to mind, you know, everybody's kind of touched on it throughout today's conversation, all things reliability. Do you guys have a separate reliability group down at Cleco, or does that fall under your purview as well?
Yeah, it's within the asset management group. It's a group we're growing. Within that group is the predictive maintenance group. You know, a group that goes around doing performance testing, does oil sampling, sends the oil samples out, and vibration analysis, thermography. They're also the keepers of the alignment equipment, laser alignment equipment. So it's guys that typically, you know, came from an operating background. And then we have engineers to supplement that, you know, evaluate the performance testing, evaluating the results of all of those predictive maintenance tools, to make recommendations on, you know, when should we be doing an inspection or a tear down of this piece of equipment. So it's an area that we're growing. You know, we're factoring in more and more the asset health, where it takes each one of these things that we use to evaluate the condition of a piece of equipment and rolls those all together to try to come up with, you know, what's the health of that piece of equipment. I think what we struggle with today, because there's not a lot of standards on that. Okay, if I get a health score of 80, because we normalize that 0 to 100. We take each one of those areas, we weight it, and we come up with an overall health score. So when I get a health score of 80, you know, what does that mean? You know, is that do I take it to the emergency room or just to urgent care? You know, to see what needs to be done. You know, so I think that's why we struggle. And I've spoken to some people out there in industry about, you know, coming up with I know IBM has a product they call IFE to do equipment health, about, you know, trying to standardize these, first the methodology to come up with that health score, and what does it mean? You know, is a health score of 90 and above, hey, leave it alone, it's running great. You know, one point I wanted to make about that, you know, I've been on the utility side for many years, and you know, the old school of thought was we tore things down when on time. Hey, it's been 5 years, 6 years, it's a major inspection. I'm going into the turbine, so I've got all this auxiliary equipment I need to tear apart. And, you know, I can't count the number of times that we've taken a piece of equipment apart that was running great and put it back together, and pardon my French here, but it ran like crap. You know, so I think more to this condition-based maintenance, you know, is the way that the industry, you know, not only utility, but other industries need to go. So I think that's a growing trend in the use of technology, like an SAP system and all these different methodologies we have to assess equipment health. I think when you factor all those together, you can get a better idea of, you know, when do I need to do something with this piece of equipment?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I think that's absolutely critical. And again, I think y'all are doing some great work down there in this space. And again, it is where we're seeing a lot of folks headed: condition-based monitoring and maintenance, all things RCM, predictive, preventative. I mean, to me, spending my career mainly in the asset management space, this is the stuff I get excited about, right? And it's how do we incorporate those new technology sensors, whether we're talking IoT, Industry 4.0, what have you, whatever buzz phrase or word it is for this week or this day, you know, the smarter that we get and the more intelligence that we have around our assets. And oh, by the way, when I say intelligence, I'm talking about data. The better data that we have and the higher quality, the more comprehensive that data is, the more effective decisions we can make around those assets, prevent those critical failures that cost not only time, incredible amounts of money, but then also have some EH&S risk components to them as well. And you know, it's crazy. You know, I've toured the country, I've toured the world, and I've talked with folks in your shoes, Mark. I've talked with plant and operational managers that have told me about, if we'd only caught this gear at that time, or if we only knew that bearing was worn, just a little bit earlier, we could have saved hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in a critical failure that occurred. And, it's a component that's relatively cheap, but can bring down the entire asset if we're in an operational production environment, bring down the entire line in your line of work, really, excuse my French, tick off a lot of customers, right? Because they're not going to have their power. So absolutely critical stuff there. Gorpum, I want to turn to you here. We've got questions around what exactly goes into some of the work that has occurred at Cleco. I think maybe they're talking a little bit more here around the alignment of bills of material, bombs, task lists, flocks. Can you share a little bit more about what you and your team took a look at and did on the project?
So basically, at Cleco, we started off with the field data collection initiative, where we were able to kind of tag the equipment asset and barcode it. And what we did was we were able to take the pictures and extract that information from the brass tag and compare that with the PNIDs, the manuals, technical data sheets. And then we were able to kind of define the function locations and assign all the equipments within that function location as per the drawings, and kind of validate that information between the impact system, which is a legacy system, and with the PNIDs. So all the three angles of the data, like the data in the source system, the data on the manuals and the documents, and data in the field was validated. So all the discrepancies were understood, and then we started building the functional location hierarchy, restructuring the function location, and assigning the right equipment under that function location as per the PNIDs. We'd redline the PNIDs. We were able to kind of make some corrections, with the changes that have happened over a period of time, because PNIDs sometimes can result to 30, 40 years, old. So old data. So we were able to kind of, address those issues as part of our data transformation exercise. And once we build the function location equipment hierarchy, we started assigning the material. We also did the material cleansing and transformation on the side, where the spare parts were, all the spare parts were cleansed and transformed as per the UNSPS standards. And the descriptions, the short description, long descriptions, the PO text, and everything was cleansed and transformed. And then similarly, the equipment was also cleansed and transformed, like equipment descriptions and the class characteristics, and all the values that go with the equipment were properly analyzed and restructured. And once we're done, we build the bill of materials, we assign the bill of materials to the right spares, build the bombs for the life cycle spare or recommended spares. We build both the cases, and then we had the task list, where task lists where we actually did not build the task list from the scratch, but we cleansed the task list, we restructured the task list based on the new requirements. And they were in the process, we were able to identify the critical assets versus critical A and critical B assets. We were able to differentiate that, and more emphasis was given to critical A assets, because they had more importance from a maintenance and operations standpoint. So once the task lists were done, we also built the maintenance plans and strategies. So that concluded the scope, in total. That basically we transformed the data, we built the data into the load sheets, and then we were able to load the data into the target.
Terrific, terrific. I think that helps shed a lot of light, bring a lot of color to the project, Gorpum. Braden, Mark, I want to finish out with kind of a quick lightning round here. Real quick questions, real quick answers. Braden, folks getting ready for S4, biggest piece of advice you'd give them?
Well, I guess I'd say those that have done something like this before would say, always get ahead of the data. I hear that time and again. It's never too early to get that started.
Terrific. Mark, we'll go ahead and close it out with you, sir. I know it's going to be tough to encapsulate so quickly, but perhaps maybe one of your biggest lesson learned on the project so far.
Once you've cleansed your data, keep your data clean. You spend all this time and effort, make sure you put the organization, the resources in place to sustain it, because if not, you've wasted a lot of time and effort.
Terrific. And with that, we are at the top of the hour. This has been an absolutely amazing Utopia Live. I want to thank Mark Prevost, Vice President of Asset Management at Cleco, Braden Slezak, Vice President of Utopia, alongside Corporal Khan, Vice President at Utopia. We've got a lot of VPs on the line here today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Any questions that have been submitted that we were unfortunately unable to get to, we will go ahead and follow up with you. As a reminder, in the chat feature in the control panel dropdown, there is a link to schedule a follow-up meeting with the Utopia subject matter expert teams. If you'd like to answer or like to have any questions answered that we might not have had a chance to get to, go ahead, hammer that link, find a time that makes most sense for you and your teams. With that, again, gentlemen, thank you for your time today. This has been incredibly illuminating, a session where we've talked about lessons learned, best practices. Wish you gentlemen a great remainder of your day and a great weekend coming up ahead here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for all of our attendees, thank you for your time as well. We wish you continued health and well-being as we make our way through this crazy pandemic. And on that note, I'm Tom Martin signing off. We look forward to seeing you on the next Utopia Live.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining today. We trust you found the content to be valuable and hope that it will help fuel your initiatives. You will soon receive an email with a recording of today's Utopia Live, along with the presentation deck and a link to schedule a follow-up discussion with today's subject matter experts. Utopia looks forward to helping solve your greatest business challenges. For more information and to view all prior Utopia Lives, visit utopiainc.com/live.